Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So I no longer use GoodReads as my reading book tracker app. I have moved over to the StoryGraph, which I would highly recommend. I love them. Not Spawn, but have been thoroughly enjoying tracking my reading on that app for, I don't know, the last 6 months, maybe a bit less than that. One of the things that I love about this app is the data, the stats that it gives you about your reading. And you know how much I love combining all of my interests with data. I love combining productivity and data, sex and data, and also books and data. I just love some really beautifully organized pie charts and statistics. It just makes me very happy. But before we dive into my reading statistics on the StoryGraph, I wanted to let you know about a special offer that I'm currently running on my Patreon. It is a bookmark. How relevant. This is an exclusive bookmark to the Common Room, which is my Patreon community, and the only way you can get your hands on it is by signing up to be a patron at any tier by Friday the 5th of March, and then I will be sending them out to everyone who is a patron, and I will be shipping worldwide, so don't worry about if you live in a different country, I will be sending it to you. This is what the bookmark will look like. It'll have a different design on each side, and it was designed by Natalie Byrne. You can check out her Instagram in the description. She is a very talented artist. I love the space theme, and my favorite thing is the little messages at the top. Talk to me about this book, and reading, do not disturb. I love the idea of post-pandemic being out and about, reading on the tube or in a coffee shop and having the talk to me about my book one facing out, and a stranger just coming up to you and being like, I read that book, it's great, what do you think? Ugh, human interaction. What's that like? But I really hope that you like the bookmark and link in the description and everything to where you can sign up. Okay, on with the reading statistics. So this is what my StoryGraph looks like. You can see some of my recommendations and things on my TBR pile, but let's find the stats. Okay, so this, we are looking at 2021 so far. I have read 10 books so far this year, and it gives you a breakdown of the moods. Ooh, okay, so I'm going real emotional, reflective, funny, adventurous, challenging, mysterious, lighthearted, informative. Mostly medium-paced, and then also mostly a fiction. Ooh, genres. Contemporary, young adult. I've read 3 young adult books already this year. Why can't I even remember what they were? Science fiction, yes. LGBTQIA+, romance. That's for a video. Have you seen that yet? That's coming soon. I'm trying out romance fiction. Historical, and then psychology, literary, fantasy, essays, biography, autobiography. What? Have I read an autobiography? What books have I read this year? Oh, look at that. I read 6 in January. Oh, I love this graph. Right, so what I'm going to do is we're going to change it to 2020 so that we have a whole year. Oh my God, you can compare 2 time periods. This is very exciting. One thing that I will say about these stats though is that when I first started using StoryGraph, I imported all of my GoodReads data. That's something that you can do. Very cool. However, some of the books imported incorrectly. For instance, I've read Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. However, StoryGraph thinks that I've read a James Baldwin collection, which has loads of his stories and books in it, but I've only read Giovanni's Room. And the same thing for The Great Gatsby. It thinks that I've read a collection of F. Scott Fitzgerald, but I have only read The Great Gatsby. So for 2020, it'll be pretty accurate. The first half of the year would have been imported from GoodReads. It'll just be the pages, like the page numbers, that are probably slightly off because it thinks I've read an entire collection when I've only read 1 book. And I don't know how many other books it did that with. But with that in mind, let's just have a good time. Things like the moods and the genre will be roughly correct, I think. So 2020, what did I do last year? So mostly reflective. Lots of reflecting in 2020. Didn't we all do lots of reflecting last year? Emotional, adventurous, challenging, light-hearted, informative. Informative is just basically like all of the nonfiction books that I read. You can have some that are not very informative, I guess. And then hopeful, funny, dark, sad, mysterious, tense, inspiring. Those are my main moods. Pace, Wow, I read a lot of slow-paced books. That's interesting to me. The pace is something that you set, so you say what the pace is when you like review the book. So the pace is entirely dependent on like your pacing through it. I'm pretty sure. And then I read mostly fiction and a little bit of non-fiction. Here we go. Genres. Mostly young adult. That's so interesting because I feel like I'm reading less young adult these days, but clearly still reading quite a lot of it. And then contemporary, fantasy, LGBTQI+, feminism, science fiction. Yes, I have been getting more into my science fiction lately. Historical, romance. Oh, even when I wasn't trying to read romance, I was still reading romance. Children's, yes. Oh, I did that video rereading my childhood faves, so that'll be where the children's books have come from. Magical realism. I'm kind of like on the fence about magical realism. Sometimes it works for me, other times not so much. Literary, graphic novel, dystopian, memoir, and then a whole bunch of other ones that I've read like one book of. Ooh, look at this. Okay, so let's ignore pages read because we don't know if StoryGraph thinks I've read collections or not. But if we go with books read, we can see that there was a little bump up in April, so beginning of lockdown. Also, it was really low in February. Obviously, like February is a very short month, but also I was traveling in February and it was VidCon and stuff. Travel and events. And then did a lot of reading in July. I think that was Reading Rush time, which is a readathon. And then September, October, also did some good reading. The second lockdown that we had, the second national lockdown in November, didn't read as much as that first lockdown. Wasn't feeling it. And then most of my ratings were 5-star because I like the books that I read, apparently. Okay, so I want to see how far back this goes. 2019! I read 28 books in 2019. Still really reflective. Lots of reflection. Wow. That non-fiction slice of the pie in 2019 was high. Lots of non-fiction. I do love reading non-fiction because I learn a lot from those books, and then also I have to read a lot of non-fiction as well, like if I'm interviewing the author for my podcast. But more recently, I'm kind of feeling like I want to read more fiction. I'm just having a really great time being immersed in stories, and also like non-fiction takes me a lot longer to read, so I'm trying to be a bit more selective about the non-fiction that I read, because I sometimes get this like feeling of, oh, I'm not a good enough person if I haven't like read these books. So non-fiction reading to me feels more like work, especially like a lot of the sex books and stuff, which I'm happy to read. Like, I love reading that stuff because obviously this is the career I've chosen and I find that stuff fascinating. But it takes a different kind of energy from me to like actually sit and read those books. And also 2021, one of the things I'm trying to do is like actively take notes of those nonfiction sex books that I read so that I can like go back and reference, because oh my God, so many of these books I've read and I'm like, I don't know when I started using GoodReads because that'll be when the dates go back until. 2018, also a very reflective year for me. Whoa! Okay, 2018 I read more non-fiction than I did fiction. That must have been a dry year for me. Lots of feminism, look at that. Maybe I was just having a moment in 2018 and I was like, must read lots of feminism. That's really funny. 9 feminism books. 2017, let's see how far back this goes. Once again, real reflective and emotional. Non-fiction and fiction, just slightly more fiction in 2017. Again, with the feminism and the young adult. November 2017, I clearly went hard with my reading. I have no idea why. And then just like, boom, plummet. For December, I was just like, nah, not gonna hit that reading goal. Read 33 books that year. 2016, 36 books. Again with the reflection. More non-fiction, all of that feminism, contemporary this time. 2015, I just think that we need to accept that every year is a reflective year for me, reading lots of reflecting books. Like books, just made me reflect. What does that even mean? Oh, wow, straight down the middle for fiction, non-fiction. Oh, memoir. 2015, read a lot of memoirs. I do remember going through like a phase of that. Like it might have been this year actually. I remember for Christmas I got like Amy Poehler's book, Tina Fey's book, Mindy Kaling's book. And so yeah, lots of women's memoirs in the comedy Hollywood business. I read 0 books in May of 2015. What happened then? Now we get to the year I graduated. Not very reflective. 10 books. So I feel like I probably started my Goodreads. Did I start it after I graduated? But I graduated uni in 2014 and I was terrible at reading books for fun whilst I was at uni. I don't know how all of the study tubers who read lots of books like for fun are doing it. I just couldn't. I like barely read any like books that weren't for my course. But 2014 was an adventurous year when I did read. But I only read 10 books that year. But did I even use Goodreads at that point? I don't know. Mostly fiction, mostly young adult, and then romance, contemporary, bit sci-fi. Oh wow, look at that. Okay, so maybe the summer after I graduated was when I got Goodreads, because look at that, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and then July, boom, 2 books. And then by the end of the year in December, I read 4 books in December. Okay, let's see what 2013 says, because if that's like, says nothing, then never mind. It thinks that I read 14 books in 2013 and I put that in. Oh my god, I'm so confused. Exclusively fiction. I only read fiction and it was all young adult. Well, not all. Young adult and fantasy. Was this when I was reading Game of Thrones? Yeah, this kind of looks like what my reading was like at uni. You've got March, which I'm assuming that was like Easter holes, because you get like a month off, 4 weeks off then. And then summer. And then I managed like 1 book in October and 1 book in December. 2012. What? I read 29 books in 2012? And I put that... honestly have no memory of using Goodreads at this point. When did I start documenting this shit? Right. Mostly young adult, contemporary, mostly fiction. Okay, I don't believe this. I think I know what's happening here. I think this is all irrelevant data. What this is telling me is that I read like 10 books in March, 1 book in December, and then 18 books in July. I can tell you for a fact that didn't happen. What I think is happening here is that maybe around this time or a bit before that, hold on, let's just go to 2011. I just want to see what's going on here. Right. Emotional, reflective, dark, adventurous, mysterious, challenging, all fiction classics. What classics was I reading? And apparently I read all 9 of those books in August. Okay, so my theory of what's happening here is whatever year I did get Goodreads, it like asks you to say what books that you've read. And so I was like adding in all of these books that I'd read but like previously, but I have no memory of when I read them. And so maybe I just like put them all in on random days and was just like, yeah, sure, I read it then. So that's what I think has happened. So we ignore all data from before 2014. I think 2015 was a normal-ish year. Yeah, I put in data all through the year. Right, so now, okay. We're going to compare 2 time periods. What we can do is compare January 2021 to January 2020. So 2021, January, read 6 books. In 2020, 4. Moods, very much emotional and reflective and challenging and adventurous, kind of similar, slightly more informative in 2020, and also more sad. Pace is kind of similar, page numbers, whatever. 2020, more non-fiction. Oh, I read a politics and memoir book in 2020. Wow, why can't I remember anything? Was it maybe Michelle Obama's book? Did I read that in 2020? I love the presence of 2 science fiction books in January 2021 and no science fiction in 2020. I want to do the entirety of 2019 and 2020. Ooh, yeah, we love a comparative graph like that. What is it even telling me though? I just read more books in 2020. Makes sense. It's so interesting to me that young adult was like a top genre for me in 2020, because I feel like I read way more adult fiction. But hey, well actually no, I did, because I read 14 young adult books, but I read 48 books in general, but it was still just a lot of young adult. Okay, I could play around with that for ages, but you will get bored eventually. If you use StoryGraph, I would highly recommend checking out that feature and just like nerding out about all of your book stats and seeing if you find anything interesting in there. I don't really understand how the community stuff works on StoryGraph yet, but I'll leave a link in the description to where you can find my profile. And I think that you can follow people, so you're welcome to follow me if you're interested in keeping up with my reading. Thank you for watching and diving into some reading statistics with me. It has been a pleasure. I hope that you are well, and make sure to check out my Patreon and the bookmark special offer if you are interested, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.